the UAP Harold, case file 003, Skinwalker Ranch. The Defense Intelligence Agency does not investigate ghost stories. It tracks foreign weapons, missiles, submarines, the hardware of other governments. So here is the question this file exists to answer. In 2008, the Defense Intelligence Agency signed a multi-year contract, funded up to $22 million, and part of that money was spent turning scientific instruments on a 480-acre cattle ranch in Utah. Not a missile site, a ranch. The wildest stories about that ranch, the orbs, the creatures, the thing they say followed the investigators home, are not why this case matters. They can't be proven, and we'll show you how thin they are. What can be proven is the paper trail, who kept buying this land, who they sent to study it, and what the government wrote down. Follow the money. Case file open. Start with the land. Because the strangeness did not start with a television show. The Winter Basin sits in northeastern Utah, near Ballard and Fort Duchesne, on the edge of the Ute tribe's reservation, and it carried a reputation for decades. In the 1950s, a local school teacher, Joseph Jr. Hicks, catalogued hundreds of UFO reports from his own neighbors. In 1974, a Utah state plant scientist, Frank Salisbury, published a book on the wave of sightings. The basin's reputation is older than anyone in this story. Now, the name. Skinwalker comes from Navajo or Dine tradition, a belief we will not sensationalize. The Ute people here have their own separate traditions, and the case file flags it directly. Describing ranch phenomena in those terms borrows a Navajo concept across tribal lines. We report the law as record, not as one nation's belief presented as another's, and not as an explanation. The modern story begins in 1994. A cattle family, Terry and Gwen Sherman, buy the property for around $200,000. In the 2005 book that made the ranch famous, they're given a pseudonym, the Gormans, same family, and almost immediately, by their own account, things go wrong.
We've seen lights. We've had cattle mutilated. 3 dogs disappeared in a single night. I'm not a believer in this stuff, but I can't explain what's been happening on this place.
The Shermans reported cattle found dead with surgical, bloodless cuts, lights and craft over the pasture. The most extreme account, and this rests entirely on the family's testimony with no physical evidence, was a large, wolf-like animal that, they said, took rifle rounds at close range and walked away. That cannot be verified. One family, one book. We tell it the way it exists in the record, as a claim. Here is what is not a claim. Within 2 years, in 1996, the Shermans sold for roughly what they paid. Break even. Whatever happened out there, they didn't stay. And for fairness, owners before them reportedly lived on that land for decades and reported nothing. The buyer in 1996 was not another rancher. It was a billionaire. Robert Bigelow made his fortune in real estate and aerospace. A year earlier, he had founded a research group, the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, to study exactly these reports. He bought the ranch and turned it into what he called a natural laboratory. This is the part both sides have to reckon with. Bigelow put real scientists on that land, the biochemist Colm Kelleher, the physicists Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis, the retired Colonel John Alexander, the journalist George Knapp. They installed cameras and sensors and watched the ranch for the better part of 8 years. And here is the result that matters most, from the lead scientist himself.
We managed to obtain very little physical evidence of anomalous phenomena.
8 years, real instruments, and by their own admission, very little hard evidence. The team's explanation was that whatever they faced behaved like a precognitive sentient phenomenon, something aware of being watched, that stopped performing whenever the cameras were ready. Be honest about what that is. It's a hypothesis, and a convenient one because it turns the absence of evidence into evidence. A camera catching nothing is a null result. Calling it proof of a clever intelligence is a choice, not a finding. But by the mid-2000s, the private laboratory was about to get a federal client, because the people who staffed it were about to bring the United States government to Utah. This is the documented core of the case. Everything here is a contract, an appropriation, or a released government document. In 2007 and 2008, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, a friend of Bigelow's, pushed for a federal program to study advanced aerospace threats and unexplained phenomena, backed by two of the Senate's most powerful appropriators, Daniel Inouye and Ted Stevens. The money went quietly into the defense budget. The program was called AAWSAP, and this is the single most important correction in this episode, so we'll say it carefully. The Defense Intelligence Agency solicited bids in August 2008. The contract went to Bigelow's company, BAS, funded up to $22 million, but that figure was a ceiling for the entire program. A program about wormholes, exotic propulsion, advanced materials. Only around $10 million was ever dispersed before the funding lapsed, and the ranch was one piece of it, not the whole. So when you hear the government spent $22 million on Skinwalker Ranch, that's wrong twice over. Up to $22 million for a broad program, about $10 million spent, only part of it ever touching the ranch. What the program produced is real and public. AAWSAP commissioned 38 technical papers, defense intelligence reference documents, with titles like Traversable Wormholes, Stargates, and Negative Energy. 37 have been publicly released through the DIA and the archive site The Black Vault. One, by Dr. Kit Green, catalogued reported injuries near these phenomena. Be precise. The document is real. The injuries are reports, and the paper does not prove what caused them. The program's DIA manager was Dr. James Lakatsky. In his own book, he described a first-person experience at the ranch that he says changed his mind. His personal account in his own words.
I had come to Utah a skeptic. I did not leave as one.
By around 2010 to 2012, the program wound down. Why is disputed, one account, says the Defense Department grew uneasy with where the work was heading. Another, that it lost its congressional protection when Reid's influence waned. Both sit in the record. One more government line, stated carefully. In March 2024, the Pentagon's UAP office, AARO, released a historical report on these programs. Per analysis of that report, it acknowledges the AAWSAP effort included reviews extending to reported paranormal activity at a property in Utah, beyond the contract's stated purpose. We are paraphrasing deliberately because we will not put a quotation on screen we cannot verify word for word, but a federal agency on the record acknowledged the program's reach. And the one document we flag hardest. In 2019, a memo surfaced, attributed to the physicist Eric Davis, describing an alleged conversation about recovered materials not made on this Earth, the Wilson-Davis memo. Its authenticity has never been confirmed or denied. We are telling you it exists, and telling you out loud its authenticity is disputed. Now the strangest claim in the file. And we'll treat it with more skepticism than anyone, because that's what it deserves. It's called the hitchhiker effect. The idea, as told by program insiders, whatever is on that ranch doesn't stay there. It attaches to investigators and follows them home, to families hundreds of miles away in Virginia, Maryland, Oregon, where the same disturbances begin. An extraordinary claim. So let's count the evidence. In the source material, the hitchhiker effect is mentioned 26 times. Every mention traces to anonymous, pseudonymous witnesses. 20 of the 26 trace to a single book, and exactly one is a primary witness independent of that book, Robert Bigelow himself, in a 2021 interview.
It followed people home. It attached itself to certain individuals and their families. That's the part nobody wants to talk about.
That is the high watermark of the evidence. One man on the record. Everything else is a pseudonym in a book. There's a medical version too, that investigators and families develop serious illnesses they blame on exposure. Separate two things. The diagnoses may be real. The claim a ranch caused them is unestablished, called a statistically impossible cluster, with no published statistics behind the word impossible. So here's the scorecard for the wildest thing in this file. 26 mentions, 1 independent witness, 20 from one book, 0 physical evidence. We're not saying it didn't happen. We're showing you exactly how little weight the record can bear. We give the skeptics the floor, because here they have a strong one. The orbs. The analyst Mick West examined the footage and offered an ordinary answer. Sunlit spider silk and insects near the lens, read by the eye as a glowing object at a distance. Not a portal, a bug, lit up. The radiation. The ranch sits on a basin, rich in uranium, oil, and gas, ground prospected for uranium in the early Cold War. Elevated readings are what that geology produces. The creature, a pterodactyl in the dark, prosaic candidate, a great horned owl. The same way a row of lights becomes one craft. A big bird becomes a monster. Then the longtime skeptic, Robert Schieffer, who argues the most dramatic Sherman accounts surfaced right as the ranch was being sold to a wealthy buyer. We present that as his argument, not a finding. We will not assert that anyone fabricated anything, and the quietest, most damning point is about what isn't there. A 5-year, multi-million-dollar federal lab should leave a paper trail. Construction, drilling, permanent structures. There is no documented record of major construction matching the legend. Sometimes the most important evidence is the evidence that's missing. Add to that the prior owner.
I lived on that ranch. Nothing happened. Nothing flew over it. Nothing came out of the ground. People are seeing what they want to see.
And the simplest fact, the modern ranch is a hit television show with every incentive to find something every week. That doesn't make the phenomena fake. It does mean a healthy viewer keeps one hand on their wallet, which brings us to now. In 2016, the ranch sold again to Brandon Fugel, a prominent Utah real estate executive who bought it quietly through a company called Adamantium Real Estate for a reported $500,000. For 4 years, the owner was a mystery. Then, in 2020, Fugel revealed himself and put the investigation on the History Channel. We'll be straight about Fugel, because he may well be watching. By every public account, he is a serious businessman who has brought modern instruments to the ranch: radar, ground-penetrating radar, drones. The phenomena on his program are documented on camera and also not independently replicated or peer-reviewed. Both are true. One lead investigator is the astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor. For the record, in 2022, the journal Science noted his television work raised questions about objectivity given roles he had held. We state it as the documented fact it is, and leave it there. The investigation is still running. Tonight, the documents only. The timeline. 1994, the Shermans buy the ranch. 1996, Robert Bigelow buys it. Nides begins 8 years of study. 2004, Nides winds down, having found, by its own account, very little. 2008, the DIA awards the AAWSAP contract to Bigelow's company. 2010 to 2012, the federal program lapses. 2016, Brandon Fugel buys the ranch. 2017, the New York Times reveals the secret Pentagon program. 2020, the History Channel show premieres. 2024, the Pentagon's historical report acknowledges the program's reach. 30 years, 4 owners. One of them was the United States government. So let's file it honestly. 2 columns, what we know. The contract existed. The money, up to $22 million authorized, about $10 million spent. The names, Reed, Bigelow, Lakatsky, Kelleher, Knapp. 38 technical papers. A defense intelligence agency that turned real instruments on a Utah ranch for years. All documented. What we do not know, whether a single reported phenomenon out there is real. What, if anything, lies under the mesa the radar keeps flagging, and whether the hitchhiker effect is anything more than a story shared among the people who told it. The government's interest is a fact. What that interest found is not. Here is where the file stands. We came to Utah for the money trail. We followed it past a ranch family who sold at a loss and left. Past a billionaire who studied the land 8 years and admitted he found very little. To a government that signed a contract, authorized up to $22 million, sent its people to a cattle ranch, and then quietly walked away too. That is the part nobody can take from this case. Not the orbs, not the creature. The fact that the United States looked, funded it, staffed it, and never managed to close it out. So we stamp it the only honest way we can. Unresolved. The instruments are still running. The mesa still reads the way it reads. And somewhere there are documents that haven't surfaced yet. The file on Skinwalker Ranch stays open, and so do we. Part 2, when the next documents surface, the UAP Harold, declassified, investigated, filed. This case was investigated and produced by an autonomous AI pipeline. Every document read, every claim cross-checked against the record. The truth isn't whispered, it's filed.